While she was dancing with him at a family wedding, I slipped her ring into her sister's hand and walked out. That half-minute choice ended my marriage, but it saved my life. What I uncovered next about my wife's so-called business meetings would leave you stunned. She wasn't only unfaithful, she was taking everything. My name's Gareth Dunlap. I'm 42, and I own Dunlap Heavy Duty Auto, the one and only truck repair shop in Cedar Falls willing to handle big rigs at 3 a.m. when some unlucky driver breaks down on the interstate. I built that place from scratch with my own 2 hands and a heap of stubborn grit. It's been my world for 15 years, until it all came crashing down. I met Lorraine 5 years back at a small diner off Route 9. She was working as a waitress, trying to make ends meet after her divorce, raising her daughter Mila on her own. Mila was 10 then, frightened, bitter, and missing the worthless father who had disappeared like smoke in the breeze. Lorraine's eyes looked worn, but they lit up when she smiled, and something about her caught me and wouldn't let go. I fell hard, not just for her, but for both of them. Mila needed a father figure, and I longed for a family. After 8 months, we moved in together, and a year later, we married. Best choice I ever thought I'd made. Within 6 months, Mila was calling me dad. That little girl had me wrapped around her finger faster than a hydraulic truck jack. We'd tinker with small engines in the garage, lawn mowers, go-karts, anything with moving parts. She had a knack for it, able to diagnose problems just by hearing how the engine ran. Made me as proud as could be. Lorraine seemed happy too. She quit waitressing and started handling the shop's books, saying she wanted to be part of what I had built to help it grow. She was good with numbers, better than me, anyway. Within 2 years, revenue jumped by 30%. Looking back, I can see the moment things began to change. It was subtle at first, the way she stiffened when I came home early or angled her phone away while texting. Little things, meaningless on their own, but together forming a truth I didn't want to face. The first glaring warning sign came last winter. Lorraine began talking about this new client, a flashy business consultant named Otis Blackwood, supposedly an expert in optimizing small business operations. She mentioned him all the time. Otis says we should restructure our debt. Otis thinks our inventory management needs work. Otis has brilliant ideas for expansion. I should have paid attention to how her tone shifted when she said his name. I should have noticed she dressed up more on days she was meeting him. I should have asked why a high-end consultant was spending so much time with a small-town truck repair shop. But I trusted her, trusted them both. And that trust nearly cost me everything I'd ever built. The morning the truth began to surface started like any other Tuesday in March. I was under the hood of a Peterbilt, fighting a blown head gasket, when Lorraine walked in wearing that new navy blue dress, the one with a belt that cost more than a month's worth of groceries. Gareth, she called, her voice carrying that careful tone she'd been using lately. I'm heading to a meeting with Otis. We're reviewing the quarterly projections. I wiped my hands on a rag and looked up. Another meeting? Didn't you just see him yesterday? Her smile faltered for a moment. This is important, honey. Otis thinks we could double our revenue if we follow his advice. What kind of advice? I asked, stepping closer. Because last I checked, we were doing just fine without some hotshot telling us how to run our business. He's not just some consultant, Gareth, she said sharply. He's got an MBA from Northwestern, and he's worked with companies 10 times our size. I searched her face, looking for something I couldn't name. Then why is he in Cedar Falls, working with a truck shop? He's between big projects. This is more of a favor. She grabbed her purse. I'll be back around 3. That's when I caught it, the perfume. Lorraine never wore perfume to business meetings. She barely wore it to church. But there she was, smelling like she was headed for a date, not a budget review. After she left, I tried to focus on the Peterbilt, but my mind kept drifting. I called my buddy Jake, who runs the parts store downtown. Jake, you know anything about an Otis Blackwood? Blackwood? Yeah, I've seen him around. Drives a black BMW. Wears fancy suits. Been hanging out at Murphy's bar a lot lately. Murphy's? That didn't add up. Lorraine said their meetings were at his office. Yeah, but here's the weird part, Jake said. I was there last Friday at lunch, and I'm pretty sure I saw him with your Lorraine. Looked real cozy. My gut dropped. You sure? Pretty sure. She was wearing that red coat she always has on at the bank. I hung up, staring at the Peterbilt's engine, but seeing none of it. All I saw were her new outfits, the extra makeup, the locked phone. That afternoon, I did something I'd never done before, drove past Blackwood's office. His BMW was there, but her Honda wasn't. I circled the block twice, then went to Murphy's. And there they were in a corner booth, Lorraine leaning in, laughing, her hand close to his. Blackwood was a slick-looking guy, maybe mid-40s, silver hair, and a smile that had probably worked on plenty of women. I sat in my truck for 10 minutes, watching her act like a stranger. When she touched his hand, I started the engine and drove home. I didn't confront her. Maybe I should have. Instead, I waited and watched, letting the doubt burn through me. Over the next few weeks, I kept tabs on her schedule, her phone habits, the way she dressed for meetings. But it was Mila who hit me with the truth. We were in the garage, changing transmission fluid on a '98 Ford, when she looked up with those serious brown eyes. "Dad, can I ask you something?" "Shoot, kiddo. Is Mom having an affair?" The wrench slipped from my hand and clattered on the floor. "Why would you ask that?" She glanced toward the house. "I heard her on the phone last night in the laundry room, talking real quiet. She kept saying things like, 'I can't wait to see you,' and he doesn't suspect anything." My chest tightened. "You sure?" "Yeah." "And when she saw me, she hung up quick and said it was Aunt Sarah, but Aunt Sarah's been dead for 3 years, Dad." Smart kid. Too smart for her own good sometimes. "There's more," she said. "Yesterday after school, Mila told me she had seen her mother at the mall with a man. They were holding hands and kissing by the fountain. Not a friendly peck, but the kind of kiss that leaves no doubt." I sank down hard on an old milk crate, feeling like I'd just been blindsided. "What did he look like?" I asked. "Tall, silver hair, expensive clothes. He was driving a black BMW. Otis Blackwood. My wife was having an affair with Otis Blackwood, and my 15-year-old stepdaughter had been the one to piece it together." "Dad," her voice had gone quiet. "Are you and Mom going to get divorced?" I looked at this girl who had called me Dad for 5 years, who trusted me to fix broken things and help her make sense of a confusing world. How do you explain to a kid that sometimes the people you love the most are the ones who hurt you the deepest? "I don't know, sweetheart," I said honestly. "But whatever happens, you and I, we're solid. Understand?" She nodded, but the fear in her eyes told me she was already bracing for loss. She'd already lost one father. Now she was watching her family crumble again. That night, I stayed up waiting for Lorraine. She came in at 11:30, claiming she'd been working late on the books. Her lipstick was gone, her hair was tousled, and she smelled faintly of men's cologne. "How was your evening?" I asked from the kitchen table. "Fine," she said, avoiding my gaze. "Just boring number crunching." "Funny thing," I replied, standing slowly. "Jake saw you at the mall today? With Otis." The color drained from her face. For a moment, I thought she might finally confess, but then the defiance returned. "Jake's mistaken," she said coldly. "I was here all afternoon." "Lorraine," I said evenly, "our daughter saw you too." Her mask slipped. "It's not what you think." "Then tell me what it is." She turned and walked away, leaving me standing in the kitchen, wondering how long I'd been living with a stranger. 2 weeks later, her sister Rebecca invited us to her annual Memorial Day barbecue. Normally, I'd have found a reason to skip it. Rebecca's parties were a parade of people bragging about vacations and home remodels. But this year, I had a gut feeling Otis might show. I was right. He arrived fashionably late, carrying a bottle of wine that probably cost more than most people's car payments. Rebecca introduced him as her business associate, helping optimize local businesses. The man had a knack for making everything sound grand and complicated. Lorraine was at the grill when he stepped into the yard. I watched her face light up like Christmas morning, only to smooth back into composure when she remembered where she was. But I'd seen enough. "Gareth," Rebecca called, "come meet Otis. He's the consultant I told you about." I walked over, shaking his hand just firmly enough to make a point. "So, you're the famous Otis Blackwood." "Guilty as charged," he said with a polished smile. "Your wife speaks very highly of you." "I bet she does," I replied, locking eyes with him. "She tells me all sorts of interesting things about you too." For just a second, his smile wavered. "Good. Let him sweat." The rest of the afternoon dragged with strained small talk and forced grins. Lorraine and Otis kept up a careful act, avoiding direct interaction while still ending up in the same circles, exchanging glances across the yard, brushing hands while passing plates, sharing private jokes that shut everyone else out. But it was the last dance of the evening that broke me. Rebecca had music playing on the deck, a slow romantic ballad under string lights. I was cleaning the grill when I saw them, Lorraine in Otis's arms, swaying like they'd done it 100 times. Her hand rested on the back of his neck, fingers toying with his collar. He whispered something in her ear, making her laugh. That unguarded laugh I hadn't heard in months. They looked like lovers. Not a married woman and her consultant, but two people who belonged together. I walked over to Rebecca's table, opened Lorraine's purse, and pulled out the diamond ring I'd saved for 2 years to buy her. Rebecca's eyes went wide. "Tell my wife," I said, placing the ring in her palm, "that while she was dancing with him, I handed her ring to her sister and walked out." I didn't wait for a reply. I didn't glance back at the dance floor. I just went to my truck and drove away, leaving behind 5 years of marriage and a family I thought was real. I didn't go home that night. Instead, I drove to my parents' house across town. Floyd and Bernice Dunlap had been married 43 years, and seeing their porch light on late at night felt like coming home to solid ground after drifting aimlessly. Mom opened the door in her robe, instantly reading the storm in my face. "What's wrong, son?" "Lorraine's cheating on me," I said, the words rough in my mouth. Dad appeared behind her, still dressed from watching the evening news. "Come in, boy. Let's talk." We sat in the same kitchen where I'd learned that marriage was sacred, that family came first, that a man's word and commitment meant everything. Now I had to tell them that their hopes for grandchildren from this marriage were gone. "How long have you known?" Dad asked, his weathered hands wrapped around a coffee mug. "Suspected for weeks. Confirmed tonight." I told them about the consultant, the lies, the dance. Mila had figured it out before I had. Mom's face went pale. "That poor girl. She's been through enough." "She's tougher than all of us," I said. "But yeah, this is going to hurt her." "What are you going to do?" Dad asked. "I don't know. Everything we built together, the house, the business, Mila's college fund, it's all tied up. And there's something else." I took a deep breath. "I think Blackwood might be after more than just my wife." I explained my suspicions about the restructuring, the debt consolidation Lorraine kept pushing, the way Blackwood seemed to know far too much about our finances. "Son," Dad said slowly, "you need to protect yourself. Get to a lawyer first thing Monday." When I finally returned home Sunday evening, Lorraine was waiting in the living room, looking like she'd rehearsed the moment. Her face was calm, but I could see the calculation in her eyes. "We need to talk," she said. "Yeah, we do." I sat down across from her, leaving space between us. "Why don't you start by explaining why you're tearing our family apart for a con man?" "He's not a con man," she snapped, then quickly reined herself in. "Gareth, what we had, it wasn't working anymore. So your solution was to fix it by sleeping with someone else?" "I never meant for it to happen. Otis understands me in ways you never could." "Understands you." I gave a humorless laugh. "He understands your bank account numbers, Lorraine. He understands business assets and property deeds." "You don't know what you're talking about." "Don't I? I've been doing my own digging. Your boyfriend's been married 3 times. Each one ended with the wife losing her business or her family's money. He's a predator, Lorraine." Her eyes flashed with anger. "You're just jealous because he can offer me things you never could." "Like what? A criminal record?" "Because that's where this is heading." "He loves me," she said, but her voice trembled. "He loves what you can give him. And when you're drained dry, he'll vanish." That's when Mila appeared in the doorway. "Mom, is it true? Are you really leaving us for that creep?" Lorraine looked at her daughter, really looked at her. For a moment, I thought maybe she'd snap out of whatever spell Blackwood had her under. But then her expression hardened. "Mila, this is between adults." "I am an adult," Mila shot back. "And I'm telling you, that man is bad news. Dad sees it. I see it. Even Grandma Bernice sees it. Why can't you?" But Lorraine had already made her choice. Monday morning hit like a sledgehammer. I was unlocking the shop when my banker, Tom Wright, called in a panic. "Gareth, you need to get down here now. Someone's been moving money out of your business accounts." 20 minutes later, I was in his office, staring at documents that made my blood boil. Lorraine had used her power of attorney to take out a massive business loan against the shop's assets, nearly $200,000, and transfer the funds into an investment account managed by Blackwood's firm. "When did this happen?" I asked, my hands shaking. "Friday afternoon," Tom said. She had all the paperwork in order. Said it was for expansion and modernization. Friday, the day after the barbecue. While I was still reeling from watching them together, they'd been emptying my accounts. Can we stop it? Tom shook his head. Not without her signature or a court order. Technically, she had the legal authority. I drove straight to the shop. 3 customers were waiting for their trucks, but Lorraine was nowhere to be found. Her cell went to voicemail. Same with the office line. That's when Jake from the parts store showed up. Gareth, I hate to pile on, but I need payment for that outstanding invoice. My supplier's breathing down my neck. What invoice? The one your wife approved last month. $12,000 in specialty parts for the Hendricks fleet job. I checked the books. There was no Hendricks fleet job, no parts order, but there was the $12,000 charge. Then my phone rang. Bill Hendricks himself. Gareth, I've been trying to get hold of your wife. We need to talk about the delays on our truck maintenance contract. What delays? Well, we prepaid for 6 months of service, but none of our trucks have been scheduled. Lorraine said you were backed up, but it's been 8 weeks. Another lie. Another missing payment. I was starting to grasp just how much they'd stolen. By noon, I discovered that nearly every major account had been drained or tampered with. Parts ordered but never delivered. Services paid for but never scheduled. Cash deposits gone without a trace. Lorraine and Blackwood hadn't just stolen my money. They'd torched my reputation in the process. I was sitting in the ruins of 15 years of work when Mila came into the shop after school. She took one look at me and knew. How bad is it, Dad? Bad, I admitted. They cleaned us out. She sat on the workbench beside me, this 15-year-old girl showing more strength than her mother ever had. What do we do now? I looked around, at the tools I'd collected over a decade and a half, the bays where I'd built my name one customer at a time, the office where I'd dreamed of expanding the business to pass on to the family I thought I had. We fight back, I said. We fight back hard. That afternoon, I did 3 things. First, I called the best divorce lawyer in the county. Second, I filed a police report for embezzlement and fraud. Third, I changed every lock at the house and the shop. Lorraine had made her choice. Now she could live with the fallout. 3 weeks into the legal fight, with lawyer fees stacking up and the stress grinding me down, someone from my past walked back into my life, like a ghost from another time. Yvonne Voss. I was sitting at Murphy's bar, nursing my second bourbon and trying to forget how fast the business was bleeding. Then I heard a laugh I hadn't heard in 22 years. In an instant, it was like no time had passed. There she was, still stunning at 40, still carrying herself with the same confidence that had captivated me in high school. Gareth Dunlap, she said, sliding into the booth across from me. I heard you've been having some troubles. Word travels fast in a small town, I said, watching her closely. What brings you back to Cedar Falls, Yvonne? My mother's funeral was last month. I'm here to settle her estate. Her green eyes softened. I also heard about Lorraine. I'm sorry. Are you? The bourbon was loosening my tongue. Because if I remember right, you predicted something like this 20 years ago. She had. The night before I left for college, she'd begged me to take her with me. Told me we belonged together, that we could make it work anywhere. But I'd been young, stubborn, convinced I needed to see the world before settling down. I was 18 and jealous, she said. I didn't want to lose you to some college girl. Instead, you lost me to pride and bad timing, I replied. We sat in silence for a beat, the weight of what might have been hanging heavy between us. I'm divorced now, she said quietly. 3 years. My ex-husband was more interested in my inheritance than me. Seems to be a theme lately, I muttered. Yvonne reached across the table, her fingers brushing mine. Gareth, I know things are complicated, but I never stopped caring about you. When I heard what happened, I had to see if you were okay. Her touch sent a jolt up my arm, but warning bells rang in my head. The timing felt too perfect. How exactly did you hear about my situation? I asked, pulling my hand back. Small town gossip, she said, but something flickered in her eyes. You know how people talk. That night, after she left with a promise to call, I did some digging. What I found made my stomach knot. Her mother had died 18 months ago, not last month. The estate had been settled over a year earlier. And according to her social media, she'd been living in Cedar Falls for 6 months. She'd been here through the whole collapse of my marriage and had only approached me once word of my financial mess went public. The next morning, I called my lawyer. Sandra, I need you to run a background check on someone. Yvonne Voss. Any particular reason? Call it a hunch. But I think my problems go beyond a cheating wife and a con man. 3 days later, Sandra's report landed on my desk, and it was worse than I'd imagined. Yvonne wasn't just an old flame looking to reconnect. She was a professional grifter with a record across 3 states: insurance fraud in Nevada, identity theft in Colorado, marriage fraud in Texas. Her specialty: targeting recently divorced men with assets. How did she know so much about my situation? I asked. That's the interesting part, Sandra said. She's been in regular contact with Otis Blackwood for months. Phone records prove it. It all clicked. Lorraine seduces the target, creates chaos. Then Yvonne appears as the sympathetic savior to finish the job. There's more, Sandra added. She's been asking around about your family's property holdings. Your parents own quite a bit, don't they? My blood ran cold. My parents' farm was worth nearly $2 million, prime development land, in the family for 3 generations. I need to warn them, I said, grabbing my keys. When I reached their house, Yvonne's car was already in the driveway. Inside, she was charming my parents with stories about her successful consulting work and how she wanted to help me through this difficult time. There's my boy, Dad said. Yvonne was just telling us about some investment opportunities to help you rebuild. Investment opportunities? I kept my tone even, but my eyes stayed locked on her. Land development, she said smoothly. A company wants to build a shopping complex. They're offering top dollar for the right properties. Mom looked puzzled. But we're not selling the farm. Of course not, Yvonne replied quickly. But you could use its equity as collateral for Garrett's business expansion. Help him get back on his feet. I'd heard enough. Mom, Dad, could you give us a minute? Yvonne and I need to speak privately. Once they were gone, I pulled out my phone and slid the background report across the table. Interesting reading, I said. For a split second, her mask slipped. Then the practiced smile returned. Gareth, you're clearly under a lot of stress. Cut the act. I know you're working with Blackwood. I know this was planned. She stood slowly, her green eyes turning cold. You can't prove anything. I can prove enough to have you arrested for fraud and conspiracy. Her lips curled. And what about your parents? Such sweet people. It'd be a shame if something happened to that beautiful farm. It was a quiet threat, but it hit like a gunshot. I stepped in close so she could see I meant every word. Listen carefully, I said in a low voice. You're going to walk out of here and disappear. If I see you again, if you so much as contact my family or drive past this house, I'll make sure you spend the next 10 years in a federal prison. Are we clear? For the first time since she'd resurfaced, Yvonne looked genuinely afraid. Crystal clear, she said. After she left, I sat my parents down and told them everything. The betrayal, the conspiracy, and how close they'd come to losing the farm. How could we have been so blind? Mom asked. Because you're good people who look for the best in others, I said. That's not a weakness. It's what makes you who you are. From now on, we were going to be far more careful about who we let into our lives. The trial of Lorraine Dunlap and Otis Blackwood lasted 2 weeks. I sat in that courtroom every single day, watching my ex-wife try to justify 5 years of betrayal and theft. Her attorney tried to paint her as a victim, a lonely housewife manipulated by a smooth-talking con man. I wasn't buying it, and neither was the jury. Mr. Dunlap, the prosecutor asked when I took the stand, can you describe the financial impact of the defendant's actions on your business? They destroyed 15 years of work, I said, looking straight at Lorraine. They didn't just take money, they stole trust. Longtime customers began to question my integrity. Suppliers demanded cash up front. I almost lost everything. And what about the personal impact? I glanced at Mila in the gallery. She'd insisted on being there, saying she wanted to see justice done. They tried to destroy my family. My stepdaughter lost her college fund. My parents nearly lost their farm. And a 16-year-old girl was forced to choose between her mother and the only stable home she'd ever known. During cross-examination, Lorraine's lawyer tried to paint me as paranoid and controlling. Isn't it true, Mr. Dunlap, that you spied on my client? Followed her? Invaded her privacy? When someone is stealing your life savings, I replied evenly. Keeping tabs on them isn't spying, it's self-defense. A few chuckles rippled through the courtroom, and I caught the jurors nodding. Otis Blackwood was sentenced to 12 years. Lorraine received 6, with the possibility of parole after 4 if she repaid everything. The judge ordered them to return every stolen dollar plus damages. This court finds that the defendants engaged in a deliberate, calculated scheme to defraud Mr. Dunlap of his life's work, Judge Harrison said. The betrayal of trust by a spouse makes these crimes particularly heinous. After sentencing, Mila and I walked out of the courthouse together. She'd legally changed her last name to Dunlap just the week before, cutting any official tie to her mother's crimes. "How do you feel, Dad?" she asked as we reached my truck. "Like I can finally breathe again." The business was recovering. Word had spread about what had really happened, and customers were returning. Some even apologized for doubting me. But the real victory was the young woman sitting beside me, a 16-year-old who had chosen loyalty over blood. "Dad," Mila said as we drove home, "I got accepted to State University. Full scholarship." "That's incredible, kiddo. When did you find out?" "Yesterday. I wanted to wait until after the trial to tell you." I pulled over and hugged her tightly. Despite everything Lorraine had done, despite the wreckage she left behind, Mila had thrived. She was stronger than both her parents combined. "I'm proud of you," I told her. "I learned from the best," she said with a smile. 5 years later, I stood in the garage showing my grandson how to change the oil on a 2010 Silverado. Yes, grandson. Mila had married a good man named Derek right after graduating college, and their boy, little Gareth, was 3 years old and already obsessed with engines. "Careful with that wrench, buddy," I told him as he tried to tighten the drain plug. "It's all about the feel, not the force." The shop was busier than ever. Surviving a high-profile fraud case seemed to have made people trust my integrity even more. We'd expanded into 2 additional bays and hired 3 full-time mechanics. "Grandpa," little Gareth asked seriously under his tiny work cap, "why did Mila's first mommy go to jail?" I looked at Mila, who was at the office desk handling the books. She nodded for me to answer. "Because she made bad choices, buddy. She chose money over family, lies over truth. And when you make choices like that, there are consequences. But Mila chose you instead." "That's right," I said. And that made all the difference. My parents were doing well. Dad had finally retired from farming, but still came by most days to supervise and tell stories to the customers. Mom had become the most devoted great-grandmother imaginable, spoiling little Gareth at every chance. The farm stayed in the family. We'd put it into a conservation trust so no one could ever threaten it again. As for Lorraine, she was released after 3.5 years. She wrote letters to Mila from prison, filled with apologies and pleas for forgiveness. Mila read them all but never replied. "I don't hate her," Mila told me once. "But I don't trust her either. And without trust, there's nothing." Smart girl. Always had been. She was 21 when she graduated college. 22 when she married Derek.